Imagine walking into a Starbucks in Vietnam. Same brand, different battlefield. The logo is familiar, but the Green Mermaid faces a very different market. Step outside and you'll see a completely different coffee scene. Starbucks isn't alone here. It's surrounded by local competition. And many of those small cafes are surprisingly packed with customers. So here's the question. Why is Starbucks struggling here? Because Vietnam isn't simply a country that drinks coffee. It's a coffee nation. Vietnam is also one of the world's biggest coffee producers. But Vietnamese coffee has something even more powerful, its own coffee culture. Starbucks entered a market that already understood coffee extremely well. And that's where the real story begins, because Starbucks entered a market with a completely different relationship with coffee. Starbucks isn't simply competing against companies, it's facing a deeper cultural barrier built over generations. In Vietnam, coffee isn't simply something people drink. It has become part of their daily life and social routines. For millions of Vietnamese consumers, drinking coffee is a familiar daily ritual, connecting work, relaxation, and conversation. Friends meet over coffee, turning cafes into comfortable social spaces where people can spend hours together. Workers also use cafes as places to escape the office, open their laptops, and work comfortably for hours. Students can sit together for an afternoon, talking, studying, and sharing a cheap drink without spending much. Traditional Vietnamese coffee is prepared in a completely different way, using methods very different from Starbucks. Strong coffee, plenty of ice, and a slow afternoon create a unique local experience without an expensive store. Add condensed milk to strong coffee, and you get the famous sweet coffee millions of Vietnamese consumers know and love. Even a simple sidewalk cafe can become a social gathering, proving people don't need an expensive interior. These small independent cafes are almost everywhere, especially across Vietnam's crowded cities and neighborhoods. That's when Starbucks faces an important problem. The coffee culture it wants to enter already exists almost everywhere. Starbucks isn't creating a new habit for Vietnamese consumers. It's entering an established habit that has existed for generations. To understand why that matters, we first need to understand Starbucks' business model and what customers are actually paying for. Starbucks has always sold more than coffee. The drink is only one part of the value customers receive. One of Starbucks' most famous ideas was the third place, somewhere comfortable between your home and workplace. It was designed as a comfortable environment where customers could relax and connect while enjoying a consistent premium experience. The drink matters, but Starbucks also sells the customer experience, including atmosphere, convenience, branding, and familiarity. And that global strategy has worked remarkably well worldwide, helping Starbucks become one of the most recognizable coffee brands. For many Americans, working from Starbucks feels like normal behavior because the brand is part of everyday life. But in Vietnam, customers may question whether the premium price is really worth paying. Because nearby, customers can find a cheaper alternative offering coffee and a place to relax. And cheaper doesn't automatically mean lower quality, especially when customers already enjoy local coffee. In fact, local cafes can feel more authentic because they match familiar tastes, habits, and traditions. That's Starbucks' first major competitive problem, convincing customers to pay more for a different experience. When alternatives are much cheaper, price matters more, especially when customers see little difference. Paying $5 or $6 for coffee is relatively normal spending for many Americans. But in Vietnam, the price gap can become much larger, making Starbucks premium more noticeable. So customers naturally ask, is the Starbucks experience really worth paying for? Starbucks has many expenses customers never see directly, even though they're included in every drink. Rent, employees, technology, marketing, and logistics create major operating costs that smaller cafes may avoid. Its international supply chain also requires complex global logistics, connecting suppliers, transportation, distribution, and stores. And premium locations in major cities often come with expensive rent, putting pressure on store economics. A small local cafe can operate with a more lean business model, using less space and fewer management layers. So the competition becomes a battle between different business models rather than simply two coffee companies. Starbucks offers global consistency, while local cafes offer something equally powerful: local familiarity. Every customer eventually makes a simple value decision. Is Starbucks worth the extra money? Walk through a major Vietnamese city and you'll discover coffee everywhere, from tiny cafes to modern chains. Many of these cafes are surprisingly small businesses, operating with simple equipment, limited space, and low overhead. Some need only a tiny counter, basic equipment, and simple seats, yet still attract customers throughout the day. Customers keep returning, creating loyal customers who may visit the same cafe several times weekly. These businesses sell much more than coffee drinks. They sell familiarity, routine, convenience, and connection. They offer something Starbucks can't easily import: local familiarity built through years of knowing neighborhood customers. Starbucks arrived with a powerful global formula, designed to deliver a recognizable experience worldwide. Local cafes responded with something different: business flexibility, allowing them to change with customer preferences. They understand local drinks, tastes, prices, and customer expectations because owners know their communities. They also understand how deeply coffee connects to social life, making the cafe more than a place to drink. Starbucks, therefore, has to learn the local coffee culture before expecting its strategy to work identically. Because global success doesn't guarantee local success, especially when consumers have established preferences. Starbucks does have one huge advantage. Local cafes struggle to match CS.H, massive scale across many countries. Thousands of stores create incredible global power, including branding, purchasing strength, technology, and marketing. But scale also creates standardization costs because large companies need systems that work across different markets. A global chain needs consistent products, branding, procedures, and consistent experiences, making adaptation harder. Local cafes don't face the same corporate restrictions, allowing owners to make decisions much faster. They can change menus almost instantly, responding directly to what neighborhood customers want. They can experiment with products, adjust portions, and change prices quickly without waiting for corporate approval. That's why smaller companies can sometimes have a flexibility advantage despite having fewer resources. Local businesses can react much faster, while global corporations may need several approval layers. And that creates a classic business battle between scale versus flexibility, where neither side automatically wins. But does this mean Starbucks is actually failing badly in Vietnam? The answer is more complicated. Not necessarily. The brand still has strong demand, recognizable stores, loyal customers, and global awareness. Starbucks remains a recognizable global brand in Vietnam, especially among customers who value international brands. And Vietnam's coffee market continues showing strong growth, meaning consumers haven't stopped drinking coffee. So saying Starbucks is dead would be far too simple, because the company still has opportunities. The real question is whether Starbucks can become truly dominant where local coffee culture is already strong. Vietnam already has enormous existing demand, so Starbucks doesn't need to teach people to drink coffee. Customers already have their favorite local cafes, often places they've visited for years. Many consumers don't need an international brand to prove coffee has real value, because they already understand it. Starbucks isn't fighting one competitor. It's fighting an entire ecosystem of cafes, chains, habits, and traditions. And that reveals a much bigger business lesson for multinational companies entering foreign markets. Companies often begin by asking, how large is the market size, and how many customers are available? But that's only half the question, because a huge market can still be difficult to enter. Companies also need to understand the market's existing behavior and why customers make those choices. Global companies repeatedly learn this hard lesson. Strong demand doesn't automatically mean easy opportunity. Entering a country doesn't mean consumers will abandon their old habits, especially when those habits are cultural. Starbucks wasn't creating Vietnam's coffee culture. It was entering a system with its own traditions. Instead, Starbucks was offering another existing choice alongside cafes customers already trusted. And consumer habits can become incredibly powerful competitors, sometimes stronger than advertising. Changing those habits requires enormous marketing investment, but spending alone can't guarantee change. You can build beautiful stores and launch massive advertising campaigns, but attention isn't loyalty. Money alone cannot instantly create cultural relevance, especially when local competitors already understand the culture. Sometimes, culture becomes a competitive advantage, giving local businesses something international companies cannot simply buy. And that may be Starbucks' biggest challenge in Vietnam, competing with deeply established consumer behavior. So if you ran Starbucks, would you keep the global formula or redesign everything specifically for Vietnam?
Thank you so much for watching. If you found this video helpful, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next videos. Your support really helps us create more content about money, business, and financial freedom. See you in the next video.